Hello, hello, hello. Thank you all for joining us today. We're going to go for we're all good? A couple more stragglers in the back? Great. We're going to be going over the talk when analysts outnumber engineers 5-1, the journey of DBT at M1. I'm not going to say our journey because I wasn't there. We're going to be joined today with the speaker who's Kelly, a senior data engineer from M1. If you are interested in engaging and you have any questions during please go to the Coalesce when analysts outnumber on DBT Slack. There we'll have admins pinning those questions, and the speaker will stay around for about an hour to two afterwards answering those on the Slack channel. That being said, let's welcome him up.
Hello, how's everyone doing today? Wonderful. Anyone else running on coffee and beignets only? Okay, great. Yeah, I'm like shaking, and I think that might be the culprit, or I'm just like nervous. We'll see. We'll get through it. All right, well, welcome to When Analysts Outnumber Engineers 5-1, our journey with DBT at M1. I think that is the longest name of a talk at this conference, so I'm already winning, right? All right, awesome. So let's go through the agenda today. So first off, I'm going to talk about what life was like at M1 before DBT. I'm just going to include like what our data pipeline looked like before and after DBT. And then I'm going to go into how we actually adopted DBT CLI. This is a DBT CLI talk. I'm not going to talk about the cloud. This is going to include our config files and just like the pull review process with analysts and engineers and how that all works. And then finally, how we actually automated docs creation in only a couple of weeks. This is going to include a nice Kubernetes 101 course. You'll all be like masters of Kubernetes after this. And then how we actually automated our doc deploy with Kubernetes. Awesome. So first off, hi, I'm Kelly Wachtel. I live in Chicago with my fiance, Eric, and our dog, Penny. Here are our wonderful families. I play volleyball. I played volleyball in college at IUPUI. We can all talk late. Everyone can like pool their guesses for what IUPUI stands for if you don't already know. Get to thinking, don't Google it. And we actually went to the NCAA tournament, which was like, pretty awesome. And I think that was the last time I was this nervous. So, all right, it prepared me well, I love to go skiing and hiking, but most of all, I love my dog, Penny. I miss her very much. This conference is very long. So here are some wonderful pictures of her just being cute. This was a video of her like twirling in the pool and then splashing down, and it was very cute. I think I'll just send it in the Slack channel later because it just didn't play, but yeah. All right, so graduated from IUPUI, again, keep thinking about those guesses, with a degree in computer engineering. Then a few years later, I went and got my master's from Northwestern in computer science. Obviously, those hand-eye coordination skills from the volleyball did not translate. I couldn't catch the hat, but still a fun picture. Cool, so throughout my career, I've worked as a CAD draftsman, a web developer, and then a data scientist, all until I applied at M1 to be a data engineer, and that was when I found the career that I absolutely love. Basically, my first day, my manager, Richard, shout out to Richard, came up to me with this product, DBT. He's like, I think this might be a good fit for our ecosystem. It was my first day. I didn't know much about our ecosystem, but I had just come from a company that we were doing a lot of SQL transformations just stored as views on our warehouse. And I had that development experience. Like, I instantly saw the value of DBT. I was so excited to use it and get to have like source control around queries. Like, oh, what a dream. Cool, so just a little bit about M1. So we are a fintech that provides a full suite of banking and investment services with a focus on long-term wealth. We're a very engineering and data-focused organization. In fact, our CEO still has a machine learning model running in production, hashtag startup life. And then because we're in the financial space, we're competing with companies 100 times our size. So that forces us to be very lean and efficient data team, and we have to utilize open source whenever we can. Okay, let's go back to March 2021. As you may recall, that is when I started. And I started with 3 other people. Our data team had just grown from 2 to 5 in less than a month. Actually, I think it was like less than a week. I think we're all hired at the same time. Our analytics team grew about 10 times in a short amount of time. Not a month, not a week, but it was still some really rapid growth in a short amount of time. And our tech debt grew 100 times. Okay, that's not really true. I mean, how do you even quantify that? But as you can imagine, lots of growth, short amount of time, we had a lot of issues. So this is what our data pipeline looked like at the time. So anyone out there use Kubernetes? Anyone out there know what Kubernetes is? Okay, great, awesome, wonderful. We're already there, but like I said, I have a little course later on. We'll all get on the same page then. But basically, for the purposes of this slide, we are using Kubernetes to run Python scripts in the cloud, right? Here we have two ingestion pipelines. One is we get files from a vendor or maybe our backend, and we ingest them through a polling script, and those files basically just get directly put into the warehouse. Now, you may be asking yourself, why aren't you using Fivetran? Well, we're in the financial space. We're working with a lot of companies that are like, we can just give you a CSV file on your S3 bucket. And we're like, OK, great, awesome, we'll take it, thank you. So we built it ourselves. And then our other ingestion pipeline is just basically a cron scheduler to run transformation scripts on a schedule. And all those things go into the warehouse. Perfect, we have data in the warehouse. So we can query the warehouse. So from here, this is where all of our transformations happen. So we are already doing the ELT, right? But those SQL queries were stored in a variety of places. One, in GitHub queries, or sorry, GitHub repos. Amazing, love that. In Slack threads. Not so awesome. Don't love that. I mean, Slack's search is pretty good, but still not great. We also were storing them as views on the warehouse itself. And then finally, just on analyst computers, just in their file organization. If they have to repeat a report, they're going to go find it in their files, right? OK, so DBT, with DBT, we could just replace all of that. Amazing, love it. OK, so once we decided that we needed DBT and it was going to fit really nicely in our pipeline, we had to come up with our ideal state, right? We wanted to utilize version control for all SQL transformation. We wanted to implement a query review process using GitHub. Version control, let's review those queries. We wanted to include DBT tests and descriptions for SQL transformations. That's just DBT out of the box. We get those tests and descriptions. We got to use them. And then finally, make a DBT-generated documentation site available company-wide. So our CEO, our product people can say, DBT catalog m1.com, or whatever the website is. I don't remember off the top of my head. And they'll get their website. Awesome. How do we do it? Well, to be honest, it wasn't that special, OK? We went to the getdbt.com, and we followed all of their instructions. We created our Git repository. We downloaded the DBT CLI, and we ran DBT init. And there was our project. We did it. We put in our credentials into the profiles YAML and set up our project YAML, basically all to the specifications of what DBT recommends. Of course, we've made some customizations here and there, but for the purposes of this talk, that's how you do it. And it's great, and it works very well. So let's get back to this picture, right? Here's our data pipeline, but I kind of want to focus in on what DBT, what it's actually doing in our warehouse, right? So here we have two types of users that are using DBT. We have our analysts, and we have our engineers. No analytics engineers yet, but basically we have those two groups, and we kind of define their roles in this specific way. So analysts have read-only permissions to the entire warehouse, plus they have read and write permissions to a singular sandbox schema. I don't quite explain that in the talk, but if you want to learn more about that, we can talk later. And then engineers have permissions to read from the source schemas and write to the target schema. So the target schemas are the production schemas. It's where any transformations that are quote unquote productionalized and the whole company can, or well, data users can query, those are going to be target schemas. And that's just represented by this nice little diagram here. The top is just our data pipeline that you've seen before. Those all go into source schemas, and then DBT, depending on what credentials you have, is either going to go to your sandbox schema or your target schema. Awesome. Okay, so actually, this is our profiles.yaml setup. So for those, if you are new to DBT, this is where you set up your credentials. This is how you get like the connection to your database. We do use Redshift, but that's not pertinent to this talk. So here we have two targets, prod test, prod execute. Those are associated to prod test is our analyst. This is the default target. So basically, if you're running from the command line, this is the target that you're going to be using. Again, they can only write to the sandbox schema. They can't do any production transformations. And then we have our prod execute target. This is what an engineer or like a reviewer would use. They have the power to use this target and execute things to our target schemas. Cool. All right, so let's talk about what an analyst workflow would look like using CLI Git, okay? Typical analyst, DBT usage, and workflow. Okay, first things first, they're gonna check out a new branch from main. They're gonna create the DBT model and document it. So that's create your SQL file and make any updates to your schemas. Oh, it's got a little messed up, but it's all right. Then they're gonna run and test just from the command line. This is all they need to do. So any models that they created or changed, this is how it's going to be created in that sandbox, how it's going to be tested, just running the simple command line. They're going to push the code up to GitHub, and then they're going to open a PR in GitHub. Awesome. All right, so this is kind of where the analyst journey ends with DBT. From here, you know, there might be a review on their PR and they need to update some code, but really it's just they're working inside their branches, right? So here we had to teach them DBT CLI and Git. It went really well. All right, they can all do it. They all came very willingly to learn it. I will say we utilize like VS Code a lot and like the point and click Git workflow, and really we never really had to like branch out of that, and yeah, it went wonderfully. All right, so yes, after an analyst has gotten their PR up, it's been approved, everyone's agreeing, it looks great. This is where the engineer comes in. All right, this is going to be the person that's going to use this other target. Typical engineer DBT usage and workflow. All right, so they're going to bring down that feature branch that was just approved. They're going to run and test using that prod execute, because we just need to make sure, you know, the test it's still everything still looks good, but really it's the run that is producing the thing in the target schema, because this PR has been reviewed. It's been approved. Let's get it into our production schemas, and then they merge in the PR. Wonderful, and that's it. Okay, so let's check in. We've got this whole process going, right? So let's check in what our ideal state is and where we're at with it. Okay, utilize version control for all SQL transformations. Implement a query review process using GitHub. Include DBT tests and descriptions for all SQL transformations. Make the DBT-generated documentation site available company-wide. Check, check, check. Haven't gotten there yet. So let's get into it. Documentation site setup. But first, I promised a Kubernetes class. All right, full disclosure, this is pretty high level, low level. It's pretty simple, you know. I'm not going to teach you how to actually deploy and write all those Helm charts and all those things, but I hope you get a better idea and hope you know that like you can do this too, I promise. So Kubernetes 101, nodes. A node is the smallest level of compute. Essentially, it's just a virtual machine. A bunch of nodes come together to make clusters. In a cluster, resources are pooled together to create the most efficient environment for whatever's running. Containers. So a container, this is really the meat of it, right? A container is a program or process that uses the resources available on the cluster. A container is self-contained with all of its dependencies included in its definition. This is usually defined in a single file, making them easy to reuse and share, so you can share them with other people on your team or the open source community. Awesome. So containers were popularized by Docker. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Docker containers. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, but just letting you know it's coming. So some container examples would be like a batch Python script, like we saw earlier in our data pipeline, a Flask app, or a Postgres database. Basically, any process that you want to run on the cloud, Kubernetes, containers. Which this actually reminds me of like when day one, learning about DBT at M1, I didn't actually have access to our warehouse yet, let alone write access. I didn't even have read access. You got onboarding processes, all that stuff. But I was so excited to use DBT. I set up a container to just run Postgres, and so I could just get it going. So that's kind of the fun things that you can do with containers, and it's great. Okay, cool. Yeah, I saw some nods, and like, has everyone done that? I guess, I don't know. Cool, so pods, a group of one or more containers is called a pod. Basically, any containers in the same pod can share the same resources in a local network. A pod is typically a main process, and then any supporting containers are sidecars. So everything in a pod is kind of related to each other. You're not having like random things stored in a pod together. Okay, and then I just included this slide to just show that Kubernetes makes things really scalable. You have replication. Pods are replicated or destroyed within clusters as they're needed or not. Awesome, great. Okay, let's do a little example. So let's say you want to run various Python scripts on a schedule. Here in this example, I'm going to run a single Python script on a single schedule, but we're going to utilize a container that is predefined. It's called a cron job container. As you can see, this is the deployment YAML. It's just YAML. You write YAML with DBT. See, I can do it, you can do it. So the image in this example is how this container can actually like run Python and run a Python script. So the deployment YAML defines the specs of the container while the image is kind of the content. So this is where we get into Docker files. So images are defined in a separate file, typically called a Docker file, and it's just containing any files or installations needed. So when this file is built, like I can build this from the command line, then all the files that are in the same directory as what I'm building will now be like in the app folder of the image, and that's all happening with this like add command. It might be really small, but so you can copy files basically into your container essentially. So this Docker file listed here, I actually think I got it from like Kubernetes or like their documentation. Didn't need to make many changes. It's using a Python base image. There are many base images available, but in this instance, we're just going to use a Python base image. We're adding our files to this image, and then we're going to run pip install to like install Python modules. A Python module that you may want to install, DBT. Just saying. Okay, not in this instance, right? We're just running a Python script. Okay, cool. So back to the example here. You can see because this is a cron job container, I can just define the schedule. And then in the command, I'm actually just running my special load financial report Python script. So once this is deployed, every day at 8 o'clock, a pod will be created, this script will run, and the pod will be destroyed. Awesome. Okay, so if we go back to our data pipeline, that's what we're doing here. That was our initial, where we were in March 2021, that's what we were doing, which makes it really easy to just run things on a schedule in the cloud. Okay, cool. All right, back to our documentation site setup, right? So doc site deploy v1. We had this initial round of development. This took us about 2 weeks and this is from us running DBT init, creating our repository, and then we had our doc site deployed up and ready for the entire company to use, okay? This is quick and dirty, all right? But very valuable. The entire company can use it. It's awesome. Okay, so we get a V2. That's all I'm saying. Okay, what you need to know, the files that are needed for documentation site, and this is a screenshot from our DBT docs. There are 3 files that are needed: index.html, manifest.json, and catalog.json, right? All of those are available in the target directory, and by default, these files are in the git ignore. So I had to get these out of the git ignore. So these were being tracked in our repository, but I needed these 3 files in order to deploy the doc site, right? So again, quick and dirty. I said it was quick and dirty, all right? Well, yeah, okay, we'll get there. Okay, cool. So we have another deployment YAML for Kubernetes, right? This is actually way simpler than the one I just reviewed because it's just a single container. And then this is actually defined as an Nginx dbt docs. That's just a fun name I gave it for this example. But Nginx is just a web server. So we're using the Nginx base image. We're copying those 3 files over to the HTML folder. Because, right, we just need those 3 files. We don't need anything else about the project. And then we're exposing it. So visually what that looks like is, oh, wait. I almost skipped ahead. How are we getting those 3 files? Okay. All right. We'll get a visual representation in a little bit. All right, so typical engineer DBT usage and workflow. We went over this a little bit ago. Previously, they'd bring down the feature branch, they do DBT run and test, and then they merge in the PR. No, remember, I took those 3 files out of the git ignore. So we need to update those files every single time we want to merge into PR. Okay, bring down the feature branch, run DBT run and DBT test, run DBT docs generate, push those files, and then merge in the PR. I don't recommend this unless you want your docs to be deployed very quickly in a 2 weeks' time. Because I had to run DBT docs generate on every single PR. But those 3 files are there. They're available in every single from every single PR, we merge it into main, so those files are available for us to run any CI processes and deploy the docs. So very valuable at the time, right? So visually what this looks like, we have our web server container. On PR merge, this is generated, it's in a pod, it gets pushed to our cluster, and from there, we have a wonderful DevOps team that actually deployed our website to our wonderful DBT docs M1 site. Cool, very simple. Let's go V2, right? Okay, I didn't want to run DBT docs generate every single time. So over the course of a few months, I think maybe it took us a couple months to realize, oh, that process sucked. So we automated it. So here's the new deployment YAML. A little bit more complicated, but still just YAML. You got this. So first off, our first container is an Nginx dbt docs container. Same one, similar idea, but it's just a container, except this time, we don't need to copy those files. We just needed to define the web server. It's just there, it's just a container, very simple, right? Okay, second container is actually a init container. I'll explain that in a little bit, but for this purpose, it's just a container. It's our DBT project. This contains all of the files from our DBT project that make it our DBT project, right? It has all of our macros, our models, our seeds, our project YAML files. And at the bottom there, you can see pip install -r requirements.txt. Can we guess what is in requirements.txt? It's DBT. We're installing DBT, so this container can actually just run our everything just inside the container. It's pretty awesome. Cool, and then finally we have our volume. I mentioned earlier, containers in a pod can share resources. This is us saying, hey, you're gonna share these resources. And so that's all defined here within this config. Wonderful. So on PR merge, just with those containers, we have our DBT container, our web server container, they have our shared storage. They're all in a pod, except you might recall, DBT container is actually an init container. What is an init container? Basically, it's just a special kind of container that always runs to completion upon pod creation. So this allows us to actually run our command, our entry point.sh, our shell script, every time our PR is merged. And what is inside that script is dbt docs generate. We're getting those 3 files. And actually we just copy the entire target file. I don't need to care about the names of those files, right? We're gonna put those into the shared storage. And so now web server container has those 3 files. They can grab them, and we can deploy it up to the cluster. And we did it. We made our doc site automated. Yay! Okay, so we're back to our ideal state. We gotta, bring it home, right? Utilize version control for all SQL transformations. Check. Implement a query review process with GitHub. Check. Include dbt tests and descriptions for SQL transformations. Check. Make the dbt generated documentation site available company-wide. Check. Amazing. We did it! So we accomplished quite a bit in the first few months of downloading dbt. We have definitely made way more improvements since then, but I just want to show how you can get dbt up and running fairly quickly and make it valuable for a lot of people, and with a really small team, right? We had a lot of analysts, not a lot of engineers. So yeah, deployed dbt documentation website company-wide within 2 weeks, and we eventually automated it. To me, this is like the most valuable thing. Like, not only are the data team, data engineering, and analytics team, not only can they now have insight into what the data warehouse looks like and what descriptions are, what tests are being run, all that stuff, but our CEO can look at it. And when someone asks you, what does this column mean again? You can just send them a little link, and it's great. And then also, huge accomplishment, trained about 20 dbt users in 2 months' time to use dbt, CLI, and Git. I am just very grateful for whoever I taught this, because they came to me with a very open mind. Many of them had never used the CLI at all before, but they all came to me with an open mind, and I'm like, you can do this. It's all integrated into VS Code or any IDE that you choose to use, or code editor. That also makes it really easy. Awesome. So like I've said, we've made even more improvements since then. This is over a year ago when we were at this state. We have now integrated dbt run and test into the CI process. Like, I'm sure you all were seeing, okay, but engineers are still bringing the branch down to actually run and test. Okay, we've since fixed that, but I think that maybe that'll be a talk for next time. So we can just leave that. We've also implemented Airflow to replace our cron scheduler. So this was actually happening at the same time that we were developing or implementing dbt. We were very busy. But yeah, because we then had Airflow after getting dbt up and running, we were then able to go and make more complicated things, make incremental models, set up automatic testing and running of those models in Airflow. We've also, which I didn't put this on the list, but actually Richard just messaged in the dbt Slack, the dbt core metrics Slack, I think, about how we integrated dbt into our superset instance and how we have that working, so you could write Jinja templating. So that's another cool thing that we did. So check out that, because he made a nice little diagram as well. So huge thank you to my now larger team, Richard, Jonathan, Tyler, Matt, Eric, and Jacob. Couldn't have done this without you. And final picture, there we go. Thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you all for joining us. There are a lot of questions in the Slack. People were very engaged. They're great questions. No, fantastic chat. So if anyone else has any more questions, please join us on the Slack. The admins will flag them. The speaker will stay around for about an hour or two to answer some of them. But for the rest of you, hope you all have a wonderful day, both in person and online. And hope you join us all for some later talks. Thanks so much.